PSI Orientation. PSI would like to cover some of our policies and procedures with you. Our objective is to inform you and prepare you for employment should you be placed on an assignment. Some of the areas we'll be covering will be harassment, substance abuse, attendance, employment issues, safety and payroll procedures. Harassment. Let's start with harassment. What you need to know about PSI's harassment policy is harassment of any kind is not tolerated. This includes sexual harassment as well as physical and verbal. If you feel that you've been harassed, report it immediately to both PSI and your on-site supervisor. Know that it's never acceptable to treat anyone at your place of employment disrespectfully. Substance abuse policy. There are a few things that you need to know about PSI's substance abuse policy. Any employee of PSI should be aware that PSI has a zero tolerance for substance abuse of any kind. The failure of a drug test could result in immediate termination and, in the case of pre-employment, the disqualification of employment for a predetermined amount of time. You can be tested for illegal substances for the following reasons: pre-employment, randomly, cause, after an accident. Attendance policy. Because PSI prides itself in a standard and supplying our clients with dependable personnel, our employees should know the following about our attendance policy. Avoid being late or absent. Our clients are dependent on their workforce, and late or absent employees cause a failure in meeting the client's goals. Excessive tardies and absences does not meet the PSI standard and will not be tolerated. If being late or absent is unavoidable, the employee must contact both PSI and the client within 30 minutes prior to their shift start time. Failure to show up for an assignment without prior notification could jeopardize future employment opportunities with PSI. Assignment policy. You're expected to complete your assignment. If your assignment is not a good fit for you, please contact PSI as soon as possible. Never walk off the job. If your assignment has been ended, report to PSI within 24 hours. Do not return to the client location. Do not contact the client. If you are temporarily laid off or part of a shutdown, contact PSI as soon as possible. Injury policy. In the event you're injured on the job, please remember the following. If you are injured while on assignment with PSI, you must contact both PSI and the client immediately. Once in contact with PSI, a representative will direct you as to what steps to take. If your injury requires medical treatment, PSI will arrange for you to see a medical provider. Do not go to the emergency room for non-emergencies. PSI will not be responsible for any costs related to non-emergencies billed by the emergency room facility on behalf of the injured employee. If your injury occurs outside the normal operating business hours of PSI, please leave a voicemail. Non-emergencies will be treated the following morning. Post-injury policy. Depending on the severity of the injury, an injured employee may be given work restrictions by a physician rather than being taken completely out of work. The physician may determine that a modified duty plan is the best course of action. Either the client to which the employee was assigned or PSI will accommodate the modified duty plan according to the physician's recommended restrictions. An example would be if an employee were to twist an ankle. The physician may restrict the employee to an activity that requires minimal walking or even sedentary work. Always remember, workers' compensation fraud is a felony offense. General safety guidelines. PSI is committed to working with its client to provide a safe work environment for all of our associates. However, the environment is only part of the solution. We expect our associates to utilize training and equipment to complement their safe work environment and hold their coworkers to that same expectation. The safety and health of our associates is a high priority. Here are some things to remember when it comes to the safety of our associates. Always follow safety rules and guidelines provided by the client. Always wear personal protective equipment, PPE. Failure to do so is grounds for termination. Again, remember that your safety is a high priority. Do not operate any machinery without prior training and the proper safety guards in place. This includes any machinery or equipment in which safety features or guards have been disabled or removed. If you're asked to perform any job-related activity by the client in which you feel unsafe to perform, Contact PSI as soon as possible. Be aware of your surroundings at all times. Watch out for your coworkers as well as yourself. No horseplay is permitted. Do not take unsafe shortcuts. If you cannot complete a task safely, ask a supervisor how it can be done safely. Always stay hydrated in hot environments. When using compressed air, only use it for its designated purpose. Shirts must be tucked in at all times while using machinery. Never wear loose clothing, necklaces, or rings around machinery. Keep all fire protection, suppression equipment, and exits clear of obstructions and ready for use. Lifting, carrying, and bending. Do not lift or carry more than what feels like a comfortable weight. Seek assistance when lifting heavy or bulky objects. Use power-assisted lift equipment when possible. When lifting an object, bend your knees, keep your back straight, and use the strength in your legs to lift, not your back. When turning, move your feet. Do not twist. Remember that larger items can restrict your view. Make sure that your path is clear ahead of time. Personal protective equipment, PPE. Wear your safety glasses at all times. If you've been assigned gloves, make sure they fit properly and they're suited specifically for your work environment. Always wear the appropriate footwear for your assignment. Wear steel-toed footwear when required. Make sure that any PPE that you'll use has been inspected and is in proper working order. Forklift safety. Never assume a forklift operator is aware of you. Always listen for backup alarms and horns, or look for lights to avoid being in the path of a forklift. Always make eye contact with the forklift driver to make sure the driver sees you. A good rule to follow is, if you can't see the driver, he probably can't see you. Never just trust your ears when watching for a forklift. Scan the area visually to increase your chances of avoiding an unexpected forklift encounter. Always stay within designated walkways indicated by markings on the floor. Always remember that forklifts are not like cars. Forklifts swing at the back, not the front. Hazard communication. You may be exposed to chemicals in the workplace, whether it be glass cleaner or acidic materials. It's your right to know all the safety information about these chemicals, and this information can be found on an SDS, safety data sheet. The SDS will show exactly what to do if you're exposed to a chemical. SDS sheets are grouped together in a book, which should be available to you at the client site. Ask your supervisor for the book location. Never use any chemical that's not labeled. Timesheet and paycheck. If the client does not report your hours to PSI, you will be responsible for submitting your approved hours by no later than Monday. PSI pays by direct deposit or pay card only. PSI's standard pay period is Monday through Sunday. Associates will be paid each Friday, unless otherwise noted, and the hours will reflect the previous work week. Pay stubs can be printed from the PSI website at www.psi.jobs. Employment. Although PSI places associates at client locations, it's important to remember that PSI is your actual employer. PSI will work with the client to resolve any issues regarding the associate's employment, such as paycheck corrections, pay rate changes, contact changes such as address, phone number, email, etc., supervisor or coworker conflicts, transportation issues, anything that may affect your reporting to your assignment. Remember, PSI is your employer.